The British reckoned the Jews would fight against Hitler, but Arabs would need to be persuaded. So in May 1939, a British government white paper restricted Jewish immigration to Palestine to 75,000 over the next 5 years. After that, Palestinian Arabs would have to acquiesce in any more Jewish immigration. Ben-Gurion's response was that Palestine's Jews would fight the white paper and fight Hitler. 32,000 of them joined the British Army. Later, they used the training to fight both the Arabs and the British. After 1945, knowledge and guilt about the Holocaust and the question of what to do for the survivors transformed the case for a Jewish state in Palestine.
We were not brought to Auschwitz to survive, we were brought to die there, either immediately on arrival in the gas chambers, or they worked us to death in the heavy industry. But should I survive, I decided to become a Zionist, because I did understand that the only solution for the Jewish people would be an independent state. A state like all the others, with all the rights and all the duties with the government, a member in the concert of the nations, a state that could protect its citizens, a state that could speak for its citizens.
American pressure was decisive as the Holocaust created a new moral argument for the Jewish state.
It is my attitude that the American government couldn't stand idly by while the victims of Hitler's madness were not allowed to build new lives.
So we saw a little bit further ahead. Hopefully I'll get to that part in this video. I think I stopped there in the 1930s. The next big event was in 1936. Some changes happened among the Arab groups in the 1930s. Some younger, more, I don't know if radical is the right word, but there were younger Palestinian Arab notables who didn't think the current leadership was doing enough. So they started organizing and decided that they had the new Arab groups, and this is what led to those events in April of 1936. These events in April of 1936 began as a pretty spontaneous Arab reaction against Zionism in Palestine, but also against British imperialism. And these younger Arab notables were not happy with the current Arab leadership. Okay? On April 15th, 1936, an armed Arab band of men robbed a bus and killed a Jewish passenger. The Haganah, the Jewish group, the Jewish military group, responded in kind and killed 2 Arab farmers. So these incidents then provoked mass demonstrations and mob attacks against each other. In order to channel this popular discontent into an effective weapon against both the British and the Zionists, Arab committees declared a general strike. So this is all happening there in April. See, that's the general strike. The general strike by the Arabs was supposed to continue until British granted Arab demands for restrictions on Jewish immigration and land sales. And they said they wanted their own democratic government. So, what happened? The Arab leadership, in response to all these events, formed that organization called the Arab Higher Committee, which basically was to be a unification committee of all the various Arab factions. And it included, the presidency would still be the Mufti, okay? But it included Christians, Muslims, and all the major the family groups. I mentioned some of those before. The Al-Husseinis being the family that was the most well known. I talked about them. So you had all these different groups come together, and it included some of those younger I'll use the term more radical or less moderate, the ones that wanted to push for these things, factions in this group too. They tried to coordinate this strike that was going on. Eventually, this strike went on throughout the summer of 1936. Okay, so 36, this dragged on for quite a long time. The British finally decided they were just going to put an effort in to end this rebellion, because there was violence that continued to go on too. So they just militarily tried to put it down, and this British military action led to the deaths of about 100 Arabs. About 1,000 Arabs and 80 Jews, because the British were mostly fighting against the Arab groups during this time. The Arab Higher Committee did terminate the strike in October. But what this demonstrated was how much resentment and anger was within the Arab community, not just against the Zionist movement, but against the British too. There's the Wailing Wall again. This is the Arab Higher Council. Note that guy is the Mufti, the Al-Husseini guy we mentioned before. Okay. There's a picture of Arab fighters from the late 30s. We're going to be talking more about some fighting going on. It didn't stop in 1936, by the way. So, in response to the Arabs' resentment, anger, and all these events that I just talked about, the British set up another commission. This was called the Peel Commission because the guy in charge of it was a man named Peel, Lord Peel. And the Peel Commission issued its report in July of 1937. Okay? The Peel Commission's main statement was there should be a partition between the Jewish side and the Arab side into separate states. So basically, the Peel Commission said there's no way we're going to be able to create a unitary state because of the situation that exists here. It's just not going to happen. Okay? So they made this very clear. They said we can't do going back to what we said in 1917 to anybody. So the only way, with a unitary state, the only way to fulfill the Balfour Declaration and the promise to Arabs is to have separate states. Okay? That's a very important concept. This is the first time that had been put forth. And the Peel Commission actually said the mandate should be terminated and that Palestine should be partitioned. Okay? And this is ultimately what happens about 10 years later. 10 or 11. And they said Britain will continue to have a corridor from Jerusalem to the Mediterranean, but we're going to just basically leave. The Arab Higher Commission completely rejected this. I mean, their position was, you came in here, you brought all these people in, you took over a country, and now you're going to take part of it away. Okay, I'm just kind of giving you their point of view there. And many of the Zionist leaders said, fine, we'll take a partition. Now, they didn't think they were getting enough territory, but they were willing to take a partition. And the World Zionist Congress actually said in 1937, we'll take a partition, but we want more land. So ultimately, in fact, really nobody was really happy about this, neither the Arab nor the Jewish side. And this boiled over in 1937 in response to this to what would become a full-out Arab revolt against the British. The British district commissioner in Galilee was murdered in October of 1937. And so the British responded by dissolving the Arab Higher Committee and arresting and deporting all the leading members. Okay? So this was huge. This guy's killed by Arabs. The British say, okay, fine, we're dissolving the whole Arab High Committee, as I said there. And they reacted pretty harshly militarily. Okay? The Mufti actually escaped to Damascus in Syria. And the AHC decided, and the Arabs decided to a revolt. So this wasn't just a spontaneous revolt. This was a planned revolt. So the Arab bands, which was mainly Arab peasants, many of whom were very poor, attacked railroads, bridges, British police stations, but they also attacked Jewish property and killed Jewish settlers. Probably never more than 5,000 Arab rebels, if you want to call them that. That's okay. We'll call them Arab rebels. They were supported by the population in a large part. So you have about 5,000 Arab fighters, that might be a better word, were supported by the countryside, by the people in the countryside. And they actually controlled a lot of the countryside of Palestine during this time. So, this was a problem, right? So you had a big problem for the British at this moment. They basically controlled all these areas, and they didn't let Jews or definitely the Jewish problem wasn't an issue for them because they controlled the area, but they didn't let the British really control anything. So they controlled all the governmental functions. They just kind of started acting like that. All right. The British decided to put down this rebellion in 1938. They brought in 20,000 troops into Palestine, the British did, and adopted very harsh measures. So that's what I say when I say reacted harshly. So the British said, we got to stop this. They bring in a much bigger army than the Arabs could fight. They have better weapons, trained soldiers. And they basically adopt very harsh actions of collective punishment on villages. So they go in and you arrest all these people in the village, even if they're not the direct fighters, right? Because they're the ones supporting this. There were also Jewish groups, the Haganah and other Jewish groups, which took part in military action against the Arabs too, sometimes hitting non-combatants. Now, it took the British until March of 1939 to restore order in Palestine. So this revolt lasted a year and a half, right? The revolt took a heavy toll. 3,000 Arabs died, 2,000 Jews died, and 600 British soldiers were killed. And of course, it wrecked the economy of Palestine, and all the Arab leaders who were not killed, who were not killed, were either in exile or under arrest. Now, the revolt failed in the sense that the British were not kicked out of the mandate, but it succeeded in forcing the British to reevaluate things. And that's where we get the 1939 White Paper. Okay? In the 1939 White Paper, this was a very important event, and that's what the video was talking about at the beginning of this. The 1939 White Paper, the British said, man, we had a lot of problems with all the Arab revolt, and maybe they have some legitimate grievances. In the White Paper, it said, and I quote, His Majesty's government therefore now declare unequivocally that it is not part of their policy that Palestine should become a Jewish state. I say again, the British government said in 1939 in this White Paper, it is not our policy that Palestine should become a Jewish state. And it limited Jewish immigration to 15,000 per year. That's kind of important. So, no Jewish state, and we're going to severely restrict Jewish immigration. 15,000 per year. And this is 1939. Connect that with what's going on in Europe, right? It also said that land transfers to Jews would be restricted to specific areas, and that in 10 years, Palestine would be granted independence. So, we're going to restrict land transfers to Jews, and we're going to grant Palestine independence in 10 years. This was 1939, but World War II was just about to start.